Hello gamers, we are back for another video. So today in the video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going over a VGC draft league. So basically, like, if you guys don't know what High Roller is, it's hosted by a member of the community, Jin Fry. He's a good friend as well, and he pretty much like hosts these tournaments on a semi-regular basis, but this one was more of like a Swiss tournament. So imagine like everything that you experience in a draft league over like weeks and weeks condensed into like 2 days. So to me, that was super lucrative, and it like made me want to play it. It was basically a tournament, right? It's basically a VGC draft tournament, like all condensed within like a couple days. So to me, I was like, well, of course I'm gonna do this, right? Like, it's literally perfect. And the entry fee was $115, so pretty steep entry fee, but it was well worth it, right? Especially because of the payout. So as long as you feel confident in your skills, it's definitely worth it. There, I will have the link below to his tweet as well. There is another one going on very shortly, so if anyone watching this video is interested in getting involved in that, the link will be down below, and you guys can put in a interest form or like whatever it is. Anyways, so this draft uses Dynamax, of course, and it is Series 9 rules. So Series 9 rules, obviously no restricted, so obviously it's a little bit different than if you were to do a draft in Series 12. I feel like that'd be pretty broken anyways, because like, I mean, you have to like use restricteds, and like there aren't really enough restricteds to go around that are balanced. So yeah, pretty much what I wanted to, I guess, go through then, as looking at this is like, okay, so looking at some of the other teams, talk about the draft a little bit, and then we're going to go through the matches specifically and like how I prep for them. I'm going to try and condense it so it's not like super, super long. Anyways, so on the day before my draft, my original plan actually like was completely different from what I ended up drafting. So originally it was Dragapult plus Incineroar, and then I was going to go with a more offensive team with like Terrakion and having some other stuff. But anyways, so Incin gets sniped, which I wasn't too surprised about. I grabbed Pult first because he usually goes away first. And I then was like, okay, so how do I go from here? And then I grabbed the Firewater Grass Core. So I grabbed Primarina and Ferrothorn and Volcarona, which ended up being like one of the best decisions ever. And at this point in my draft, I had also planned on going for Snorlax and Butterfree as well, because they were pretty good budget picks, and then they ended up getting sniped as well. So I pretty much just had like a bunch of like kind of rings around like the snake, or like a bunch of like, you know, times around the snake where like I got sniped, so I had to completely adjust my plan. So I ended up grabbing Torracat Comfey. To be honest, like a lot of these mons, even though I drafted them, you guys are gonna see like they did not really like help me that much. But yeah, so then I grabbed Greedent. Dusclops Glacier was huge. That was probably like the best part of the late draft for me. And then Passimian and Coughing. And looking at some of the other teams, there were definitely some like weird choices in the first early rounds. Like when I saw Snorlax get taken round 3, I was kind of like, what? But yeah, it ended up being a good snipe for me, I guess. So yeah, there were a bunch of other teams, but I definitely felt like my draft was the best. So it's interesting when it comes to these kind of draft leagues, because a lot of people, the way they approach it sometimes is they will go in and be like, okay, so my plan is to, you know, get like 2 S tiers, like 2 A tiers, 2 B tiers, 1 C tier, and then 1 of everyone, right? Now, I pretty much was like, okay, no, like I think that the optimal way to draft is I'm going to grab 4 really good S tiers, even though it's expensive and results in me having like 2 not so great mons as my last. If I can get like 1 or 2 that give me substantial value, and then the last one, like I don't use, like what, it doesn't really matter that much, like that was fine with me, because like I'd be bringing all the other mons like really commonly. And actually Greedent was like really broken. You guys will see when we like talk through it, but it was actually one of the best mons in my entire draft, which was really funny. So anyways, going on, then finally we got the schedule. So we played 3 rounds on day 1, and then we played 4 rounds on day 2 plus cut if you make cut. So for me, like my priority was just trying to win as many as possible on the first day to kind of have that momentum carry over into the next day. So for me, it was like pretty crucial that I didn't like fall too far behind, right? Because if you lose like the first 3, it's over already, right? So I want to make sure I at least went 3-0. So my first set I played versus Maddie Ayers, right? And if you look at Maddie's team, he had pretty much a Spectre Ghost Horse team. So the team was like pretty it was pretty scary on team preview, but like I felt pretty good. I'm gonna actually move over to where is it? Right here. So I felt pretty good going into this team only because like once I got Trick Room up versus this, it seemed like it was just super oppressive. He didn't really have that many slow mons that could deal with my team. He eventually ended up changing the Hippolyta on the Vanillix, which was my only fear because like that was his Trick Room answer. He changed Ditto to Musharna, which didn't really matter, and he had Sylveon to Conkeldurr. Now, Conkeldurr theoretically could have been annoying, but because I had a Primarina, like it wasn't scary at all, right? So Primarina was like huge in this set, and pretty much what I just needed to do was ensure that I could get Trick Room up. So I kind of figured in prep, when I was talking over it with NJ11, if you guys don't know NJ11, he's like a good friend. He helps me like prep for a lot of stuff. We basically just figured out that like, okay, like he either runs Safety Goggles Spectre to like get around and like taunt my, my Trick Roomers, or he goes with something like Offensive Spectre and just like goes for it, So what we had decided was going to be safe was like having the Mental Herb on the Comfade, mostly because what that allows you to do is like, even if you get like taunted by the Whimsicott around Rage Powder, like they have to double taunt you, and that forces them to reveal Safety Goggles and gives the other slot a free turn. So I felt pretty good overall about like how my prep for this went. This is actually one of the only sets where I took Comfade. It ended up being like really bad besides this, but it was like fine for this specific one. So I'm gonna turn the music off. So going into game one, pretty much like my priority was just getting set up so the Primarina could sweep. Now, the reason why I went with Volcarona and Dusclops game one was because I was mostly like, okay, well, realistically looking at this team, Dusclops can outbulk everything, and then if he reveals that the Spectre is Safety Goggles, that's fine. I also had a game plan like, if he leads Spectre, turn one I'm gonna swap to Glastrier and just Struggle Bug, so that there's literally like no way for the Spectre to like get a big KO, and like I can kind of build off of that momentum the next turn. So yeah, I'm actually gonna put this on fast so we can kind of get through turns quickly because we have a lot of games to cover. Okay, so Taunt comes out here, which is fine. I go for Struggle Bug. Aurora Veil comes out. And as you notice, like literally what I'm just doing here is I'm just setting up the Trick Room, because taking out Whimsicott here just sets me up so I can just win with Dusclops. I literally just click Trick Room and there's like no drawback, right? And like even with ally switches and everything involved, it was pretty safe for me just because I could kind of just take advantage of the Trick Room pressure to just really win the game. And like it wasn't going to be bad for me at all. I was pretty much able to just clean up the game with Glastrier. Now, Primarina was also in the back in this game, if I remember correctly. I ended up going towards Glastrier because of the lead. I kind of figured that like I would be able to get a lot of leverage out of it. Now, going into game two, I was pretty sure that he was going to adjust into the Ghost Horse, but that ended up being okay for me. I wasn't too concerned about that. So for that game, because I thought he was going to switch to Ghost Horse, I ended up going with the Comfey lead this time, so that way I couldn't get sniped on my Clops. And as expected, it is actually going to be a Spectre that has goggles, right? So I wasn't too surprised about that. I actually didn't go for Rage Powder specifically because of that reason. Also because I was kind of calling like a taunt and like a taunt, or like a taunt and a, some other move. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna Trick Room and Struggle Bug. Realistically, like Spectre is forced to max here, and I get in a position where I can just win with one of my Dynamaxers in the back. But I get Trick Room up here, which is like really bad for the opponent. And I go for a Draining Kiss here to like help keep my Comfey alive and just Struggle Bug. In hindsight, Heat Wave could have been good to just remove Cop, but like I actually didn't really mind like kind of stalling the Spectre turns with these two. And Volcarona was like crazy because Volcarona literally just sat here and Struggle Bugged like the entire game, and it just gave so much utility where it was just able to do a lot. And even with the crit here, Glastrier is in like more than a fine position to just kind of win the game. And like I ended up actually maxing Glastrier anyways because I had Floral Healing worst case, and I could also just kind of steamroll with Dynamax anyways, so I wasn't like too concerned. And Volcarona coming in here, obviously I'm able to put on a lot of pressure, and I just went for a Rage Powder here to obviously eat whatever attack was coming. Hurricane connects, I live. This lets me redirect the Cinderace attack and just lets me go for a Max Quake, and I pretty much don't get punished. I could also go for Hailstorm here if I'm worried about obviously the bounce or something like that coming from the Cinderace, but I was kind of sure it was going to be a Pyro Ball, so I just went for it. Then Primarina comes in. So this actually still looks like fairly scary, but the thing is like I have Blizzard on Prima, so I can kind of pressure both slots, and like it has to be a double in the Glacier to kill it anyways, which means that I get rid of the Zapdos and I just beat Spectre, right? So here, I end up eating the burn. Thunderbolt comes out in the Prima. Blizzard comes out, which means the Zapdos is guaranteed going to drop this turn. And I go for a Heavy Slam so I can't miss into Spectre. At this point, the game's pretty much over because there's just no way for my opponent to win the game. Even with the Roost coming out, I just click Moonblast and I just click Heavy Slam here, I believe. If I'm not mistaken. Or Icicle Crash. I didn't want to risk like missing the KO. But yeah, so like game one, pretty solid. It was a overall like pretty good application of how I wanted to play the game one. So then I'm only gonna go over like the highlights, by the way, because I don't want to like spend too much time going over the matches, but like I just wanted to kind of like give you an idea of like how I approach prep. So then I end up playing versus T-Mosk, and I end up playing versus Neve, or not Neve, sorry. I end up playing versus T-Mosk, and then I play versus, let's see. Then I play versus the Jordan. Okay, so these two I end up beating pretty handily. I beat them 2-0 as well. So going into day two, I'm already, obviously 2-0, 2-0, 2-0. I'm undefeated at this point. I have a really good start to the tournament. So now the next day, I kind of got my prep in early, and it was tricky because at the start of the first day, I actually started with a loss, which was pretty brutal because then I was 3-1, right? I still need to win 2 more, and I ended up winning the next one, which was good. I ended up winning versus Grizzly. Grizzly's right here, right? And I felt pretty good. I was 4-1, so literally I just need 1 more win. My last opponent was Colding Light, which was definitely gonna be more challenging, I thought, than like my 6th opponent. So I was like trying to beat my 6th opponent, so I wouldn't have to worry about it. But then my 6th opponent actually ended up beating me. With the core of like Rillaboom, Entei, Gastrodon, Grimmsnarl, which was like really annoying. And then I ended up beating Colding Light with this team. I was more so worried about his team specifically because of Toge's Excadrill, but interesting enough, he actually never really used Excadrill versus me. He kept bringing other things, which I was more than fine with, right? Like that wasn't a problem, but it ended up being a, kind of tricky. It was like a more tricky thing on like team preview to prepare for. So I'm just kind of trying to speed run through it to like give you guys the context on it. So I end up winning a close like 3-game set. That being said, so now we get in the top 8, right? So at this point, I'm feeling pretty good. I kind of realized at this point that like I was kind of crutching on the same stuff. So if we go over to my showdown here, let's pull up showdown. Oh. Is it? There you go. Okay. So quite literally, I ended up just bringing a lot of the same mons over and over again. So you'll notice like the variety was kind of around here. But as soon as I got to like round 7, it was literally the same team all the way down. And that's just because I kind of realized like sometimes I was forcing other mons when like there was no need to. That being said, Greedent as the occasional mix-up in some of these games was like huge. It was actually like sweeping people when I got like Belly Drum set up. But like for the most part, like it was literally these 6 that was always being used. And like very similar sets, right? So in round 7 versus Colding Light, I had the Glacier with Policy. I had, support Polt, a Dusclops, Primarina, Volcarona, Ferrothorn. So support Polt was like pretty much like guaranteed. I stopped using offensive Polt because it just wasn't like helpful for this team. And then going into top 8 versus Paul J, which I'm actually going to cover, that match was something that I needed to prepare for a little bit harder. So we're going to go into this. So basically like Paul J's team was pretty much about me neutralizing the opposing like Arcanine if it was beat up, or just being able to kind of position around the 2 Intimidators if it was Intimidate. Now game 1 was a complete slaughter on my end, right? Like I got absolutely murdered. And this was because my original game plan was to leverage Glastrier and just like go for attacks on attacks. And I expected him to go with support Arcanine with Will-O-Wisp. Now you guys will see like why that's such a problem, because I do not see the Intimidate go off on the Arcanine. And as soon as I see this, like I'm like, oh, I'm in big trouble. So Arcanine Dynamaxes, beat up comes out. I swap in the Volcarona here to try and eat the Flare. It's just not really that good at this point. It's pretty brutal. Breaking Swipe comes out here. I get like a little bit of baby chip damage, but this is doing nothing at this point. Like I do get the Sash off, but like it's not really helping me that much. I do Ally Switch here to try and like catch the Flare from the Arcanine. And the beat up in the Volcarona, but it just ends up being a double target into my Polt, so I just end up losing it. I try and get a mind game right here and like hope for the crit, which is basically saying like, okay, I know you think I'm gonna protect Glacier, so I'm just gonna attack, and if I crit you, like I'm in a position to win. But yeah, it ends up being pretty brutal here. Max Darkness comes out and it just takes out this, and like at this point, right, like I've already come to terms with the fact that like I have lost, right? You have to use Glacier like really well in this matchup and not let it be caught out of position. And in this game, like I just like it caught out of position. Now the good thing is with beat up stuff is like it only really works in a game 1 scenario. It doesn't really work in like a multiple game scenario. So for me, primarily, I would say that like I was less worried about the beat up. Like I still had to respect it, but I wasn't like as worried about it going into game 2. Plus, I knew the crook was scarf off of the speed, so that also helped me as well. So then we go into obviously game obviously game 2. So Paul J ended up changing it up here. I just decided to go with the safe trick room mode here because it just felt like stronger into Paul J's team, especially knowing what he was doing. It also redirects from the beat up, which was good, just good for me. So Azumarill maxes here, which is like fine. For me, I just end up going for a Will-O-Wisp immediately into the Azu. So this is like a crazy good turn 1 for me because I just burn the Azu for free and I'm like wasting its turns now. I did not mean to do that. There you go. So I burn it. It goes for a geyser into my Volk. Now I swap here into Ferrothorn. This is mostly just so the water move going into the slot does not like chunk away my Clops, and I also get the opportunity to go for a Trick Room again if I need to. I do end up bringing in Primarina here. So the main reason why I brought in Prima here was because I wanted to bait the last turn coming out from the Azumarill, and I knew that it would probably bait like a double target with attack, so that would let me get like a Leech Seed off with Ferrothorn, right? And that was pretty important to me because it just puts me in a good position, especially being able to chunk away at the Thundurus over time. So at this point, right, I have two choices, right? I can go for a Dynamax or I can go for a different move. So I end up opting to go for an attack here. So this ends up being like really scary because I end up taking way more damage than I expected. And this is pretty bad because especially if like Naganadell's in the back, right? It's like not a good position. So I end up going for an Iron Defense to keep like the Thundurus honest. If it goes for a Taunt, obviously it's not doing that much damage. I realize here, I'm like, oh, I'm in like a terrible position, right? So I go for a body press here into Naganadel if I'm not mistaken, and I swap here so I don't eat the poison move. If I let Primarina die here, I'm in a really bad spot. So I need to keep Prima alive at least so it can like potentially win an end game, right? So Sludge Bomb comes out here, Clops eats it. I go for a body press. So this is like a decent amount of damage, but obviously like I need to do a bit more. So I knew that there was two things that could happen here because my Prima's in the back. I know that realistically here, right, there's either a flamethrower and a thunderbolt coming out into my Pharaoh, or you're gonna call that I'm gonna swap into Prima, swap out Naganadel into like your Backmon, and go for a thunderbolt into my Ferrothorn to catch the Prima. But I was like, I need to keep him honest here because if I don't, like, I'll just lose the game to back Arcanine. Like swapping in. So I was like, I'm just gonna attack the Naganadel, and like if I die, I die, like whatever, like good run, I guess. So he ends up swapping, which was really good. Like I actually think he should have just clicked Flamethrower here. I might have lost if he just clicked Flamethrower, even though I had a lot of special defense, like I probably would have died. But yeah, so Thunderbolt comes out here, and then I go for a Nightshade, and I go for a Body Press, which does a million to this Arcanine. So this is really good for me now, right? Because even if Arcanine Flare Blitzes me and KOs me, I can actually kind of play this out a little bit more, and I can go for a Nightshade and the Thundurus, which gets it in the closer endgame versus the Naganadel, right? And I actually end up healing the full. So they try and stop the Trick Room here, which is good. I live the Flare Blitz, and they die to Rough Skin, which is huge because now the Body Press goes into Thundurus, and now it's a 3v1. So Naganadel literally cannot beat me just because of like how split its damage is going to be. And I already know that like it's going to probably die to 2 Nightshades, right? So this comes out here. I go for a Nightshade now, and it does 33%. So I know that the next Nightshade is going to kill. And here I can just go for an attack, and I should be absolutely fine, right? So for me, like I very close game, right? I was scared because I was like, oh my god, I could have lost this. So I was already like, okay, like we need to make sure the next game is like not this close, right? So finally we go into the next game. I was kind of worried that he might adjust the beat up again, but I was like, nah, he's probably not gonna do it. So I end up going for the same lead because it worked pretty well last time, and this time it's an Arcanine Thundurus lead. I wasn't too concerned about this really. I was just like, I'm just gonna go for immediate damage on the Arcanine and the Thundurus. So going for like a Nightshade and an Arcanine and a Heat Wave is just really good because I get to spread a bunch of damage like turn 1, right? I missed the Arcanine, which like matters minimally. Like it matters a little bit, I guess, because like it would have been an extra chip, but like it's fine, right? So Thunderwave comes out into the Dusclops, which is fine. I literally was just like, I am going to attack every single turn here, right? I get paralyzed, which actually was like kind of negative given the situation, but getting Glastrian in this position was like perfect for me because it just like let me get in a really good position. And I have a Lumberry, which got revealed this game, which I'm glad it wasn't revealed earlier, and Crunch comes out. So this is just a free Hailstorm for me in the Thundurus and a free Nightshade into Arcanine, right? Now, in this position, you might assume like, okay, like Joe probably just has this one already, right? So I made a slight boo-boo here, to put it bluntly, right? So I should Trick Room here always, right? Like, Trick Room is 100% always the play here. Um, which, like, it didn't matter because I got KO'd, but, like, it could have been, like, scary if I hadn't. Like, I clicked Nightshade here and I kind of realized after. I'm just bringing this up because, like, it's just, like, context behind the match, but, like, it ended up not mattering here, right? But like that was kind of like the main mistake I made. Quake was really good here because it actually ends up putting the Azumarill in the range of Quake, like another Quake. So for me, I was just like, okay, like I need to attack with Prima. So the reason why I attacked with Prima here is like, okay, I know Naganadel is Sash, right? So because you're Sash and you know that you're probably gonna die to Hailstorm anyways, like through Protect, you're gonna attack here, right? But if you decide to attack, right, into my Prima, you know you won't kill because you're Sash, so you have to double target it, which means that I'm just free to double attack here. And if you decide to double target my Glacier for some reason, or protect and attack my Glacier, like I punish you for that, right? By going for Moonblast. So for me, this was always like a really safe position. Starfall comes out here, doesn't really matter. If this had been Geyser, I'm kind of curious. Like, no, I don't think it makes a difference, actually. Geyser's not the correct play, yeah. I don't think there's anything that could have been done here. Because even if you Geyser, right, to preserve the Naganadel Sash, you'd have to get, like, 2 crits with Sludge Bomb, right? So, I mean, I guess you play, that's better to play for, right? Because then you could Protect and then Sludge Bomb and then Protect, Sludge Bomb. But yeah, I mean, at this point, right, Glacier just cleans. Glacier was, like, a crazy good mon, honestly. It definitely carried me way farther than, like, it should have. But yeah, so then I end up rematching Colding Light in top 4, right? So I'm pretty much like, okay, like I already beat Colding Light before. I know it works well versus him. In our 7th round match, just to give you guys a quick rundown, pretty much what happens is I'm just like, okay, so I'm just gonna Glacier you, and like I hope you can figure something out. Like, have fun, right? And it ends up working pretty well in like game 2, game 3. Game 1 was like a bit rough for me, but I end up kind of figuring it out towards like the end of the game. So I'm like, okay, like I can kind of do the same thing. I am gonna adjust a little bit of my sets just to like be ready more for Togekiss this time, which does end up coming. Togekiss did not come last time. And then I was like, okay, and I also need to like make sure that like overall like I'm ready for like a similar style of team, right? So I noticed Morgrem's on the team now. Morgrem was added and it wasn't there last time, so like I was sure there was gonna be like some kind of shenanigans with like Prankster and stuff. If you guys don't know, in draft, like I put almost every round I put Ally Switch on every single one of my mons that could learn Ally Switch, just because in draft it's so important to steal game 1s and like game 2s, and also it like gives you like such good like surprise potential, and like it's always a mind game for your opponent, right? Even if they know that you're running Ally Switch every round, like, okay, so do I call the Ally Switch turn 1 or not, you know? But yeah, so anyways, Dragapult, Glacier lead. So I led this because it just kind of covers for every lead possible. So if I lead Dragapult and I lead Glacier, I immediately get like Ally Switch, Breaking Swipe, Will-O-Wisp, and Light Screen, which gives me like a ton of utility versus the opposing team. But for me, like when I saw Morgrem and Darmanitan, I'm like, I have a feeling this is like a eject button, right? So for me, I'm like, okay, I'm literally gonna Ally Switch turn 1 and like see what they're gonna do, right? So I literally just max Glacier turn 1. Trick comes out, and it ends up going into my Pult, and like my Pult dies turn 1, but this is actually like a pretty good turn for me. So I just end up going for a Steel Spike here, and now the Morgrem's like kind of useless, and I also have a boosted Glacier, right? So to me, like it's just already a really good position. And at this point, right, I'm just like, okay, well, Gigalith is gonna Dynamax, but like it doesn't really matter at this point. You can trick away my Dusclops like Berry, but it's fine. So I think here I end up going for a Trick Room, or no, I go for a Nightshade because I don't want Trick Room up, right? I'm trying to remember the exact situation. Yeah, I go for Nightshade. I didn't want to set up Trick Room here because setting up Trick Room obviously just lets Gigalith go first. And here, like, I'm just like, okay, you know, Dracozolt, it might attack, but like it's fine. I go for Helping Hand here to lower the Bolt Beak damage. I really thought Steel Spike would do more here, but honestly, I should have known because it's a Gigalith. Like, I probably should have just targeted in the Dracozolt here. But it was fine, right? It ended up being okay because like the chip on the Gigalith ended up like helping me, even though weakness policy went off. Like I would have survived for sure on Glacier, and like, okay, sure, you take out my, you know, you take out my Dusclops, but now I get him Prima. So this is also an adjustment that I learned from playing versus him in the previous set, that like having Prima and Glacier as your 2 attackers with like the 2 support ghosts was like really good into this kind of team, right? So I kind of kept that going into the next match. So I protect Prima here, and I knew Bolt Beak was probably going to go into it. I mean, you could Bolt Beak into Glacier, but at such high defense, you're not really getting much. And then if you just let Prima attack, you just lose, right? So I just need to hope I didn't miss high horsepower here on the Gigalith, which thankfully I did not. I take out the Gigalith, and at this point the game's pretty much over, right? Like I literally just have to like land high horsepower and the game's over. And like the reason why I say I gotta land high horsepower is because high horsepower is more accuracy than Icicle Crash. Ironically though, I actually ended up missing high horsepower, so now I'm kind of scared. I'm like, oh my god, if I get like crit or something, I just lose. Luckily, no crit, even though it was like kind of scary, and I end up getting the high horsepower KO, right? So going into game 2, I'm like, okay, I don't know if I really have to change up too much stuff, because like what I did felt pretty good in game 1. I just have to kind of still be aware of like the adjustments my opponent can make. So Gyarados Morgrem comes out. I know that there's the eject button still, so to me, I'm just kind of like, okay, like I'm just gonna swap turn 1, right? Fake Out comes out here, and it actually ends up being a waterfall. So like this is actually a really bad turn 1 for me. Like after I saw this, I was like, oh my god, this might actually just be like a GG go next, you know what I mean? But you know, I bring in Prima, and I'm like, okay, like he has to target one of the Mons, right, with the trick eject button waterfall. So like I'm not gonna Dynamax, but I will like Moonblast to take out the Morgrem, right? So like Moonblast comes out here, kills Morgrem, even though it got the Eviolite, and Dracozolt comes in. So this is a bit scary, but my Glacier is in a really strong position at the very least, so it like puts me in like a solid enough spot, right? So Overgrowth comes out, Dusclops eats it, obviously. Hailstorm comes out. So this is where I made like a tiny mistake. Well, it wasn't really a mistake. So I was kind of worried about an Airstream and a Rock Slide. Or like an Airstream and a Protect, sorry. So like I was worried that if I Steel Spike through the Protect, I would boost it. Or if like the Dracozolt came in and I Steel Spike, like it'd be kind of bad, right? So Protect ends up coming out from Gigalith here. Geyser ends up coming out instead, which is fine. I go for another Hailstorm, which is fine. At this point, I'm like, okay, like I think at this point I should just Steel Spike, because my opponent's probably just gonna like leave Gigalith in at this point, because I've literally shown that I'm willing to Hailstorm into the Gigalith. So I just go for the Steel Spike. I end up taking out the Gigalith. I get an attack boost. So this is like huge for me at this point, because I'm still in a really good position, even though it was like kind of rough towards the middle game. Or like towards the early game. And then at this point, I'm just like, okay, I literally just click Blizzard, and I just click like high horsepower, and like there's no drawback to this play, right? I just have to hope I don't get flinched, and as long as I don't get flinched, I win. Well, flinch or miss, right? And I connect like Icicle Crash. I went for Icicle Crash there, because if my Primarina had Blizzard first for some reason, they ignored Primarina, it would have gotten redirected in the Gyarados, so it just ends the game right there. In hindsight, maybe high horsepower was safer, but like also like I think just going for Icicle Crash was better. Yeah, and then Icicle Crash comes out, and I win. And I was kind of scared because like I got crit there, but ended up being fine. So now I'm in top 4. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm like, this core has been working pretty well. So I'm like, do I really need to like change much? And then I look at Cortex's draft, right? And let me look. Cortex. Okay, yeah, his draft is quite literally like almost the same as Colding Light, right? Like there's a couple differences. The only difference is he has Togekiss Spectre, which I would argue is like way better. And he has a better Prankstermon and Meowstic, but I'm like, okay, this is still like doable. So I ended up bringing like pretty much the same team, right? I was just like, well, you know, it'll be fun. So I'm gonna open up all 3 games, and pretty much like at this point, I just realized like, dude, I'm literally like 1 win away from like, and the winning and like getting second place is like a huge stark difference. Like it's literally like $300 for second place versus like $900 for first place. So I'm like, yeah, I kind of want first place, right? That'd be really sad if I lost. So and like also is important to me because like I haven't really won a tournament in a while. Like I've done real well tournaments like VGC stuff, right? But like I haven't won, so like it would definitely be very satisfying to win tournaments. I mean, I always feel like that, right? But it'd be nice. Because and like honestly, like it's funny because like I know this is a smaller tournament with like 20 people. I think it was just because of the money on the line that made it like feel so satisfying to do well. Anyways, so then I'm playing versus this, and I noticed Cortex actually, like, I was really worried about his Excadrill Togekiss, which again, like, was not brought. Like, every time I was worried about like Colding Light or like Cortex like bringing Excadrill, like they just didn't bring it. So I was like, oh, all right, that's like fine, you know, like I'm not complaining. So I felt pretty good about this. Like last year definitely went in versus this, right? So now game 1, I will be the first to admit my ears just absolutely got slaughtered. Anyway, so like game 1, I knew like I definitely got a little bit lucky because turn 1, right, like I was prepared for like Spectre or Will-O-Wisp stuff. And I was definitely Hailstorming into Spectre here because I knew that like Togekiss was either going to protect or swap, right? Now, in hindsight, I should have gone for a Heat Wave here because Heat Wave would have allowed me to just KO the Spectre outright, or at least put me in a position to do so. But Will-O-Wisp ends up missing from Spectre, which is like really good for me. So like there were no complaints there. And like here I can just pretty freely just go for like a Steel Spike, right? And he ends up missing Wisp again, which in this case, it did not matter. But had he found out that I was Lum, it could have changed how he played like game 2, right? So the first Wisp was the more important one though. So anyways, I go for a Steel Spike here. I boost my defense versus the Clop on my Clops. And like at this point, Gyarados is like really not threatening. So I was debating between going for Hailstorm or going for Steel Spike into Togekiss, but I ended up opting to go for Hailstorm here, which then I found that his Togekiss was Yache Berry. So in that case, like Steel Spike was 100% the optimal play, right? So I bring in Volk here. Now the reason why I didn't want to bring in Prima is mostly because the Gyarados still like was, you know, obviously Dynamax. And I might need Prima to beat the Gigalith. So I don't really want to like jeopardize Primarina's safety until I know for a fact like what's in the back, right? So I go for a Icicle Crash here in the Togekiss. I find out it's Protect. I go for a Will-O-Wisp here. I Scout, find out it's Lumberry, which is fine. Now Primarina comes in, which is absolutely okay because at this rate, right, like I know that you do not have you do not have Protect available in the Kiss, right? So I just Protect here and I go for a Icicle Crash. So the reason why I do this is to avoid the Power Whip. Like I really do need Primarina alive here. And if Primarina drops, like I could be in a very questionable position. So here, this is a pretty free Icicle Crash for me in the Gyarados and like a Moonblast. So I kind of cleaned up the game really well and I was very content. Like if you guys, like honestly in draft, I didn't realize how potent Life Orb Primarina plus Glastrier is on like against so many teams with Trick Room, right? So for me, it was like absolutely insane and like definitely carried. I was very, very content with how it went, right? So I ended up just taking out the Dracozolt here. You know, I was pretty content with that. So in game 2, I'm like, all right, I feel like Turtonator is going to come, but like, I don't really know how to adjust to that right now. So I'm just going to kind of stick with the same thing and then I'll kind of figure out from there, right? So, you know, obviously I end up leading Glastrier Volcarona again. Here, Gyarados comes out again. This time I actually opt to go for a Hailstorm into Spectre and a Heat Wave. And this way I'm like, okay, like this time I actually get rid of Spectre, right? I end up missing Gyarados. Now I get a burn. Now I didn't realize how important this was, but he was actually safety goggles, so the burn actually guaranteed Spectre died, so I did get pretty lucky taking out the Spectre here. That being said though, right, like it was still Turtonator, so I had to kind of be scared. And like I think the problem was I just played too passive versus this Turtonator, even though I knew it was like Iron Defense, right? So for me, like I brought in Clops, I swap it in here, right? Takes Geyser. I know it's going to go down to the second Geyser, which kind of sucks. So I end up boosting the defense, mostly just because I know that like Dusclops needs to live the second Geyser to actually win. So I go for an ally switch here. Now, in hindsight, I actually pretty much like kind of regret this ally switch because what I could have done here that would have been better is just gone for a Trick Room outright. This turn for sure, I should have been going for a Trick Room, right? I end up going for a Helping Hand. And like that ends up being like the worst mistake ever because if I had just gone for like a Trick Room here, like I would have won the game on the spot because then the Turtonator is in a position where it just dies to Primarina, right? And then I still have, you know, obviously my Glastrier in the back that can do something. So now like I bring out Volk here because I'm forced to, right? And I swap into Primarina because I know that Waterfall might come out, but it ends up being a Bounce, which is actually worse. So at this point, I'm like, okay, so I have two options here. I Protect and take out Gyarados, or I attack with Hydro Cannon and hope that I live the Turtonator's Body Press plus the Bounce, or the Bounce misses. So I opt to go for the miss because I'm like, okay, like the miss is like probable, plus like I could definitely just live because my Primarina is really bulky, right? It's like max HP, 68 defense. So I'm like, okay, I probably live this, right? So I swap in Volk here just in case the Bounce is going into the like it's a Bounce and like a Burning Jealousy in the Glastrier, but I end up just losing my Primarina there, and as soon as I saw that, like the game was over, right? So for me, I'm like, okay, so going into this game too, like Turtonator definitely needs to not do as much as it did this game, right? So I end up leading Glastrier and Primarina this time. So the reason why I opted to go for this lead is because I noticed that now that he knew I wasn't leading Primarina, he was kind of disrespecting it. So I'm like, no, I'm going to lead Primarina and you are going to respect this thing, right? So turn 1 is a swap into Gigalith. I immediately just say I'm geysering and killing this Turtonator immediately. Like I am getting rid of this Turtonator even if it kills me, right? So I swap into Clops turn 1 and I go for Geyser. This is just to kind of set up like the Trick Room pretty quickly. That was my game plan going into this. And it ends up being Airstream going into Primo, which is totally fine for me. and I end up going for the Max Geyser here, which takes it out. So now he brings in Dracozolt. Now, in this position, I have two options, okay? I know that this Dusclops only dies to a double up, right? So for me, I'm like, okay, do I attack with Prima or do I max card with Prima? Right? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to attack because I think that Bolt Beak is going to go into Dusclops because Protect is pretty obvious. And if I just double move, like, even if I do end up losing my my Prima, which kind of sucks for Turtonator, I can at least like leverage Glastrier a little bit, right? And like kind of win that game from there. So I opted to just go for the risk of clicking Max Hailstorm. And as soon as I saw this play come out, I'm like, oh my god, like I'm in such a good spot, you know? Because it becomes so much more winnable. Because at this point now, I just bring in Volcarona and I just go for a Hydro Cannon. And there's literally nothing you can do to stop me from doing that. Because if I just redirect your Gyarados here and I go for the Geyser, then I change the weather so I don't get KO'd, right? I end up going for Struggle Bug here. In hindsight, like Struggle Bug was kind of a cringe move, but like I was kind of confident. I guess I wasn't gonna attack. I actually don't know why I Struggle Bug here. I probably should have just gone for a Rage Powder. But anyways, I end up going for a Geyser here, which is fine. And I Rage Powder here. Power Whip ends up missing Volk, which doesn't matter at this point, right? And I just go for a Hydro Cannon. As soon as this goes off, like I know I win the game. But the miss like definitely solidified it for me. But yeah, I mean, I made some cringe plays in here for sure, but like for the most part, I felt like pretty okay with how I played in this scenario. So yeah, and then Primarina recharges. At this point, I just click Moonblast and I just attack. I did get crit on Glastrier, which was kind of scary, but it didn't end up mattering anyways, unless I like potentially miss Icicle Crash. So I was, you know, it ended up being okay. So I was very happy with this win. It had been like a while since I had like won a tournament, and like I know it's a 20-man tournament, so it's not like there, I definitely view them differently. Like winning a tournament like this is different than winning like a big VGC tournament, and like I definitely still want that, right? But like it's nice to like get a win in when you play things, and like the $900 was definitely a nice bonus. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Obviously, you know, we're so close to Scarlet Violet. I'm trying to mix in like videos of like the end of Sword and Shield basically with Scarlet Violet stuff. I definitely enjoy talking about Scarlet Violet a bit more nowadays, but this was actually pretty fun, so I didn't want to make a video on this. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for all the support as always. Make sure to check out X9 Academy if you guys would like to improve your skills, especially when Sword and Shield, or not Sword and Shield, Scarlet Violet starts up. And also just make sure to obviously, you know, support me down below. Drop some comments, let me know what you guys would like to see in the future. And for my question of the day, what do you think is the best Pokemon coming out in Scarlet Violet? That is my question for you. And yeah, thank you guys so much as always. I appreciate it, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.